Hey guys, and welcome back to Steampunks, the show where we go through all of the games that have come out over the last week on Steam and let you know what's worth playing. My name's Jess.
And I'm Ed.
And without further ado, let's talk about what's worth talking about. What's your first game?
All right, well, I played this game called Dead in Vinland, which I initially thought was going to be a Banner Saga and Darkest Dungeon mashup. Turns out that's kind of the case, but not really. This is more of a really deep D&D
Cool.
game. It's set in a Viking universe, and your house is pillaged, and you have to escape via a stolen boat with your wife and angsty daughter and your crazy sister-in-law, who is a witch of some kind, and you end up stranded in this island with a handy campsite, and your goal is to survive. It's a survival game,
Right.
first and foremost. You'll need to keep an eye on things like food and water, as well as fire, along with resources like wood, stone, to build things for your campsite, as well as just maintain your settlement
Right.
and your characters. So there's a few different sort of layers to this game. The survival layer is sort of a turn-based system where there are 3 phases throughout the entire game. So there's morning, afternoon, and night. So with your morning and afternoon, you can actually sort of do things like perform tasks like exploring or like scavenging an area or gathering wood. And the evening phases are reserved for sort of chatting with your surviving members, as well as dishing out food and water rations to keep them hydrated and fed. So you need to explore the island as well as maintain your campsite. So this island is huge, and exploring will reveal sort of little bits of the world map, one tiny square at a time. And each square will have something you can usually take action on. So like a tree you can gather sort of special sap from, or stuff you can search for resources, and there'll usually be a choice to make, so you can either do one or the other. You search one place or a different place, and you might get varying results depending on it. Certain people are obviously good at certain things, and there are skill checks which relate to scavenging, harvesting. Every character has a bunch of skills, so like physical, mental skills, concentration, endurance, and all of those break down into even more niche sub-skills to denote how good they are at everything from like fishing to gardening to just like stealth and stuff. Every character also has a well-being sort of stat sheet, so you have to manage fatigue, hunger, sickness, injury, and depression. Most of the decisions you make affect your relationship to other characters, but also between other characters themselves. And the third layer is the battle system, which definitely has some serious Darkest Dungeon vibes, in that your positioning on the battlefield matters. The presentation is very influenced by Darkest Dungeon. The one sort of different thing is that there are ability points, so you can kind of perform multiple skills during your turns in battle. The characters in battle look really cool, but I'm not really a fan of the art and conversation. I just think they look a bit, wonky. And the writing's a bit iffy too. I don't think it can decide whether it wants to be modern or Nordic, so there's a bit of both. So it's $20 on Steam, and this would be a pretty sweet portable game if you've got a laptop or Surface or something to play on. But yeah, that's Dead in Vinland. It's a pretty deep D&D experience.
But I just know that we must survive.
All right, well, speaking of deep experiences, particularly in RPGs, I played a game this week called Tower in Time. It's very Divinity, Baldur's Gate-esque isometric RPG. It's party-based as well, and the thing that does separate this from those games is that it is purely a dungeon crawler. So in that way, it's kind of like Torchlight. You're sort of just going through the levels of a dungeon, but there are a ton of quests to do, and there's a really solid story. The game takes place in a fantasy realm called Artara. Something massive has happened that has pretty much decimated the land, but what there is in the middle of that cataclysmic landscape is this tower has appeared. One of the things that's really interesting is the characters themselves don't really know what happened in their history. That's kind of the point of the cataclysm. It just like messed up everything, and now no one knows what happened or why. So you pick up books as you go that are basically cutscenes that play out and give you little clues to where the story has come from. There's really great voice acting in these scenes, which is awesome, and I really love the choice of their graphics. The layouts in the dungeon are really lovely to explore, and even though there is no dialogue, the music is really excellent. It's very Heroes of Might and Magic. So the way combat works in this game is pretty interesting. So you'll approach someone who's kind of representative of the combat, much like you would in Heroes actually, and then decide whether or not you actually want to engage in that combat. If it's an ambush, you don't have a choice. Once you're in the fight, you can slow down time as much as you want. So while it's not turn-based, there is certainly that ebb and flow that you get into to while using abilities, waiting for cooldowns. You can have your characters stand their guard so they only move when you tell them to move, or they can attack automatically. Characters don't get experience for beating up enemies in this game. Instead, the way that you level your characters is by paying for levels when you go back to town. The town really functions as kind of a place for you to level your characters, to craft items, craft better weapons. You can enhance skills or pick new ones, and new levels grant new skills. And on top of that, there's also alignment, which shows how the party members feel about each other. In this game, it affects morale and it affects when you are in battle. So you get buffs for having positive alignment, and you get debuffs if someone in your party doesn't like everybody else in your party. So Tower in Time is $25, which for how much game is in here, I think is totally worth it. If you're already a fan of these kinds of isometric RPGs, there's a really good chance you'll be a fan of this one, and I would recommend it.
All right, I'm sick of talking about all these complicated games. Let's go simple.
Okay.
I also played a game this week called Oh Dear.
Okay.
So if you like old school Sega games, especially their arcade racing titles like Outrun and Super Hang-On, then this is for you. Oh Dear is a game about drifting your station wagon on your way to Grandma's house and either killing or avoiding as many deer as possible.
Wait, either?
That's right, either. So the beta version just came out on the Humble store, which I'm basically taking as an early access version, and it plays very much like a tuned up version of Outrun. So the arcade style driving is really fast, it's really smooth. The crazy drifting in Oh Dear is what it's all about. So it's really easy to execute and it feels really great to hold because of the speed of the oncoming obstacles. There are a lot of long curvy roads and long lines of deer to hit. So you can either go for a high score where you aim to hit as many deer as possible, or aim for a run where you hit as few deer as possible.
Okay.
So the vibe of the music changes depending on how many deer you kill or avoid, and apparently they're working on getting the landscapes to differ as well. The music, which is by this guy called Motohiro Kawashima, who was one of the composers of Streets of Rage 2 and 3. His stuff, which he co-composed, is more in line with actual like trance and electro music.
Right.
And it really suits this sort of bizarre game really well. Like I said, it's early access beta and it costs $6.66 on the Humble
Wow.
store. And it's a really great little pick up and play arcade game that feels really good to play, looks fantastic, and hopefully gets better as they work on the full version. Oh, and also apparently Yu Suzuki, who's the creator of Outrun, Virtua Fighter, and Shenmue, played this and said, quote, "Not too bad."
Not too bad.
Which is a rousing endorsement if I ever heard one.
All right, well, I'm glad that you guys just spent a really long time watching deers blow up
Get smashed,
into little bloody balloons, because that's a really good entree for the second game I played this week, which is also on the simpler side. It's called Friday the 13th Killer Puzzle. So a little bit of a content warning here if you're a bit squeamish. This is a really fun slide puzzle game that happens to have a very gory premise related to Jason Voorhees, of course. So this is the kind of puzzle where you can only move in 4 directions, and wherever you move, you will always move to the end of the possible space. So your job is to kill all the campers in every level by navigating the levels while the severed head of your mum cheers you on and helps you out if need be. Your victims basically need to be used as puzzle pieces to get where you need to go. So early in the game, it's just about killing them while going between those 4 lateral lines of movement, and that's fairly straightforward. But when you get up to episodes 3 and 4, each episode contains about 13 levels, it starts to get really challenging, and there's only one right way to go about each level. So you can either restart the level if you've completely messed it up, or if you just messed up the last move, you can just rewind it, which is really handy. So you can play the game in PG or R gore mode. PG has no screaming or blood coming out of people. Personally, I really enjoy this game. I like puzzles like this a lot. At the very end, when you kill the last camper, there's a little slider at the bottom that goes back and forth, and if you stop it over the red area, you get an execution. Some of these executions are really funny. Depending on the weapons that you have equipped at the time, he'll do different executions. The weapons aren't like different levels of weapons. It's really just for aesthetics. This is a free-to-play game up to episode 8, and then episode 9 to 12 you can buy for $3. That might not sound like much, but I'd say it takes about half an hour to do an episode each, so you do have a lot of game in there for free. You can also buy weapons and rare weapons if you really want to, but there's no reason to. You earn them every time you level. One of the most excellent things about this game is that there is a button in the menu that when clicked literally just makes that horror ma sound, and it's great. If this looks like your thing, the developer really knows what they're doing. This is actually incredibly similar to a game they made in 2016 called Slayaway Camp. It's kind of just a fun time waster that actually does get pretty challenging once you get about 20-30 levels in. So if you like this kind of puzzle game and you don't mind the gore, it's a good way to go.
All right, so that does it for this episode of Steampunks. If you played any good games of the past week and we didn't talk about them, you should let us know at our Twitters. I'm at Edmund Tran.
And I'm at Jess McDonald.
But until then, we'll see you next week for another episode of Steampunks.
See you then.